Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, we've got the great Sean Hannity is up early. Hey, Sean, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
We're doing okay. Just adjusting to the news, just as we
by the way,
started
Steve,
our news. Yes, sir.
I am always up early watching you guys.
Thank you.
That's my morning routine before I work out.
Are you DVRing us? You need to DVR us, Sean, at 6 o'clock.
Yes, DVR. I do miss the 6 o'clock hour, so 7 o'clock is usually my tune-in time, but I like to DVR the first hour, which is always great.
I could call you and recap at the end of the show if you want, Sean.
Okay, so Sean, the lead story is Nikki Haley's going to drop out at 10 o'clock, and as Jackie Heinrich just said, she is, it sounds like, according to John McCormick from the Wall Street Journal, who we're about to talk to in a moment, she will encourage Donald Trump to earn the support of the Republicans and the independents who supported her. How do you think she's going to put that?
I don't think it really matters in the end. I think the disappointing part of what Jackie reported is she had said before the Republican primary debates, it was the criteria to get on that debate stage that she would, in fact, endorse Donald Trump or endorse the eventual winner and support the eventual winner. So, and I know Ainsley asked her about that yesterday when you had both President Trump and Nikki on yesterday, and she had said she would, so she seems to be going against her word. She gave that first indication over the weekend. That's disappointing to me. I think that she should stand by her word on that.
Maybe she'll clarify that today.
With that said, though, look, I give a lot of credit to anybody that steps in the arena. Yeah. I think it is a very, very hard job to get out there and run for president. If there's a primary and let's say there's 16 or 17 people in, like there was in 2016, or 7, 8, whatever the number happened to be this year, there's only going to be one eventual winner. And at the end of the day, I think most people don't get in if they don't think that they're going to win. But at the end of the day, I mean, Nikki, like everybody else in the Republican Party, maybe that if you were supporting Governor DeSantis or Tim Scott or Vivek Ramaswamy, you're going to have to ask yourself a question. Do you really think do you want 4 more years of Joe Biden and his failed policies, or are we going to be better off with the policies that President Trump had brought in during his first term? And is he running on a platform you are more in agreement with? Yeah. Now, if you look at where Joe Biden is, I think Joe Biden did not have the best night, as everybody seems to claim. There are a lot of states where people said, nah, I'm not voting for Joe Biden, and the percentages were high. He didn't really have any opponent last night. And more importantly, you just got to look at all the polls that have come out. I discussed this last night when I was on with Brett and Martha. We've had the New York Times Siena poll, the Fox News poll, the Wall Street Journal poll. CBS was interesting to me because Donald Trump beat that threshold. It was at 52% in terms of a head-to-head matchup with Joe Biden. That is a big number. Then you look at the Gallup approval rating of Joe Biden. Joe Biden was only at 38%. You look at the ABC poll, 86% of the American people think that this man is too old to be running for president again. People see what I had been pointing out since 2020, which is that he is weak, he is frail, he is a cognitive mess. I've been saying forever he has not had a clean event in at least 6 months that I can think of. Clean being defined as, he's not mumbling, bumbling, stumbling, having a hard time figuring out where to stand, or exiting stage left or exiting stage right. The most interesting poll that I saw, one of the polls that I just mentioned, 10% of Joe Biden voters in 2020, they will be voting for Donald Trump.
That's stunning.
That has to be sending off, sirens and alarms in the Biden White House. That is a big problem for them. Then you look at, for example, the Democratic coalition, the base of the Democratic Party. And a part of that base would be African-American voters, Hispanic-American voters. That would be young people. He is bleeding support, double digits. In some cases, over 20% of that base is not supporting him. They don't think he's done a particularly good job. And then you can start breaking it down and start looking at issues. When you look at the issues, all right, I mentioned this last night. Historically, what do people think about when they go to the polls on Election Day? Mm-hmm. Peace and prosperity. We have war in Europe. We have war in the Middle East. We have a president, frankly, that I do not think garners a lot of respect on the world stage. Mm-hmm. Does Vladimir Putin, President Xi, the mullahs in Iran, Kim Jong-un, do they really respect Joe Biden? I don't think so. There's been no consequences, for example, in the case of China when they fly a spy balloon over our country. No consequences when they aggressively are maneuvering around our fighter jets in international airspace or aggressive maneuvers in international waterways against our Navy. No consequences at all. Joe Biden just seems to let it all happen, and nothing happens. If aggressive moves are made against our ally Taiwan, nothing happens there. So, and you got an economy that, frankly, okay, maybe some of Joe Biden's friends are doing great. And I understand Joe's going to talk a lot about shrinkflation. They've been trying to push this great narrative about Bidenomics for a long time. Well, how's that been working out? Because 60% of the American people, and I've lived this life, they're living paycheck to paycheck. Not the greatest way to live. And so when they talk about, well, he wants to blame greedy corporations or shrinkflation and everybody but himself, the buck should really stop with Biden, because inflation went up because of his policies, not because of corporate America. So on the economy, I don't see a good story for them to tell.
Nope.
Sean, it's such a good point, and I want to bring you back because you just laid out the issues. And when I was interviewing Donald Trump about 3 weeks ago, we talked about on the issues.
I liked your interview yesterday. It was really good.
Thank you, brother. Well, I learned from the best. And we were talking about you in that last interview as well. And I said, look, when you go to the issues, you win on the issue. But some people have a problem with your tone sometimes. And he said, you know what? Sean Hannity tells me the same thing. So how does Donald Trump weave the issues while still being tough, because people like the toughness as well, but still get those suburban women voter as well, and independent voters?
Look, you're asking probably the single most important question. Is the base of Donald Trump, which we have witnessed now during this entire primary season, is that enough to win a general election?
Right.
To me, that does not get him there. However, we're beginning to see, I mentioned the various demographics that seem to be leaving Joe Biden. That, to me, is called an opportunity. And for President Trump, if I was him, I would look at those numbers. I would go into communities, traditionally, maybe even big cities. I'd go to Chicago. I'd go to New York. I would go to Los Angeles. I would go to majority minority neighborhoods around the country, and I would ask people, are you more safe? Are you more secure? We know the answer. How are your schools doing? How do you think you've been doing economically under Joe Biden's policies? Now, a couple of numbers let me throw out at you. I believe this was the Wall Street Journal poll, and Joe Biden has now been graded after 3 years. And on climate change, most Americans feel he has failed. On helping African Americans, most Americans feel he has not done a good job. He's mostly failed. The working class, 58% of respondents think he has failed. Improving our image abroad, 61% believe he has failed. On the economy, 61% believe he's failing. Making us safer, 63% think he's failing. He has not unified the country. 69% think he's failed on that. And then what have we been watching since Iowa? What is the number one issue that keeps coming up? It is Joe Biden's open border policies.
Oh, a perfect setup for our next soundbite.
Yeah,
Sean Hannity.
Sean,
Sure.
yeah, we wanted to bring you to this because we're talking a lot about immigration, and there was a straw poll that said yesterday in Virginia, the top two issues, immigration and the economy. Jen Psaki and Rachel Maddow were mocking Virginia voters for saying that immigration is their top issue over on another network. Listen to this.
If you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very, very contested area.
Build the wall. Like, what?
Bill Malugin, our own Bill Malugin, has a reality check for them. He posted this on X. 2 weeks ago in Virginia, an illegal alien from Venezuela was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl in Campbell County, Virginia. He had crossed illegally into El Paso, Texas in September of 2023 and was released into the U.S. by the federal government. What's your reaction, Sean?
You know, I wonder if they were speaking or talking to Lake and Riley's parents.
That's right.
Who are suffering and in all likelihood will never be the same again. I wonder if they'd be mocking or laughing that way in front of them, or the fact that we know now that an Iranian terrorist is in our country looking to hunt down people like former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. There's nothing funny about it. The most dangerous aspect, and I think it's the reason why it is the #1 issue in terms of failure, was 71% of Americans think Joe Biden's immigration policies have failed, is we have now close to 10 million illegal, unvetted Joe Biden immigrants in this country, and we do know something about them. We know that hundreds have come from Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terror. Their satellite state, Syria. We know that tens of thousands have come from China. Why are people making the long trek from China to the southern border? We have, 15,000 from Russia, our #2 geopolitical foe behind China. Thousands from Egypt, home of the Muslim Brotherhood. Thousands, over 6,000 from Afghanistan, where, by the way, Al-Qaeda has rebuilt their training camps, according to a report that came out last week. So what we're looking at here is the single greatest national security threat in our lifetime. Now, we had some of the top former FBI officials. They joined together. They sent out a letter, and they have referred to this as an invasion of military-aged men. And the worst part about this entire story, and we're probably going to watch Joe Biden tell the biggest lie on Thursday night. He will try to blame Republicans for his policies. In the first 100 days of his administration, he undid all of the successful policies that he inherited from President Trump as it relates to the border, stay in Mexico, building the wall, etc. They even, at the time, Alejandro Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, he was bragging, oh, the list is so long of policies we rescinded. I don't even have time to list them all. But they have been telling us, the American people, in spite of what our eyes have been showing us, that the border is closed, that the border is secure. Joe Biden has said it. Vice President Harris has said it. Mayorkas has said it. Karine Jean-Pierre has said it. Jen Psaki has said it. Steve, your son Peter, has been very vigilant and asking tough questions about it.
He asked about Riley yesterday.
And I think, look, I've been saying this, and when I say I pray to God that I'm wrong, I really mean it. But the possibility that people from our top geopolitical foes that we know are in the country are setting up terror cells within the United States, the odds, I would argue, are 100%. Now, do I hope and pray that I'm wrong? All of us lived through 9/11. Those images that day, those memories are seared into our brains. And we have now set ourselves up for another potential 9/11 or worse. We saw what happened with Hamas, for example, on October 7th. It was awful. Well, we could have 9/11, October 7th, or worse because of these policies. and there's no explanation for that. And for him to then turn around after 3 years of lying and saying it's closed and secure, that should be offensive to every single American, because that is a flat-out lie.
Well, that is why immigration and migration is the #1 issue. Sean, thank you very much. We know you're awake at 7 a.m. Thanks very much for being awake and talking on TV.
I get up on time just to watch you guys. I get my coffee brewing. I just had a couple of sips before you called.
All right, thank you so much, Sean.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.